Real quick overview. How do you pull the rack and pinion out of a XC90? This is a 2006, so it's probably the same for, I don't know, 02 through 14 or something like that. At least similar. So first thing, get the car in the air, pull the wheels off. You're going to have to lower the front clip. In order to do that, you've got some 18mm bolts. These are 13mm. That's just part of this little bracket here. So you have 4 18mm, one on the back, one on the front for each side. Again, 13mm. Alright, and this exhaust bracket, these are 10mm. There's 4 of those in there, so then the exhaust can come down with the engine, because remember, the engine is attached to this front clip. You'll have to loosen the sway bar. So this is, I believe that's a T30 Torx and a 15mm nut. So you'll put your wrench on there, your 15mm, and then you'll stick your T30 Torx in there to hold that still, and then spin that nut off. And the tie rod ends obviously coming out of the rack, so those will have to loosen up. Now you can hold this end of it still if your impact doesn't freely break this off without spinning that stuff. So you can just put a crescent, or that's probably like a 9mm or something to hold that still. But the nut itself is a 18mm. Okay, then you've got 4 bolts holding the sway bar in place. Those are 13mm. Once you get this front clip lowered a little bit, just loosen these. These are pretty long bolts. You could loosen it and let like an inch or an inch and a half come down to give you more room to put your tools in there. So 13 mils, 2 on this side. Then it'll be 2 on this side. Also, to identify your rack, you see this little gizmo right here. It's got that blue wiring harness coming out of it. That tells me that this XC90 has variable assist steering, and the racks are different, so make sure you get the right one. The other thing you want to watch for, you can kind of see those lines right there. Okay, hold on, let me focus. Okay, those 2 lines right there. 1, 2, that's your pressure line, your return line. You can have either a threaded line, or it's going to be a clamp in with an O-ring. Let me show you the difference. So here's the rack that came off of it. So this is a press-in line. So you see this plate just sandwiches those fittings, and there's an O-ring in there, and that's how it seals. This is the threaded line. Obviously it looks kind of like a nut, and it threads in there on that flared end to press that to seal it. Now these, the internals of the variable assist steering and the regular are completely different, so nothing is compatible. I thought maybe I would pull the shaft out of this good one and stick it in here to replace that broken shaft. This car had hit a curb or something, and that jolt sheared those gears off of there. But they're 2 different, so I had to order another rack. I got an LKQ. It was like $250 shipped, so not bad off of 2008. But just make sure you get the right parts for it. Okay, so you're gonna have your clip down a little bit. You're disconnecting your sway bar and the tie rod ends. You're getting a little more wiggle room. You're taking off these wiring harnesses. Your exhaust is loosened up so it can come down with the engine. This just has a little plastic button that holds it in to the cross member there, so that'll just pop out. There's an 8mm holding the line bracket in place, so that'll come out. And then you've got 1 bolt that comes up from the bottom Okay, I think that's a 14 millimeter. And then you've got 4 pressed in studs that are in that rack, and they're pressed down from the top. So there's one right in this little nook, and it presses down kind of like a lug stud. And then there's a nut on the bottom. So there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. And then once you get your lines off and the sway bar kind of loosened up so you can start moving things around, there's a mount that's just off center to the left hand side. It's like a rubber ball mount. It's going to have a bolt fastening it in place that will have to come out. So here's the makeup of those things. You see this stud is splined. Focus. So it's going to drop through that rack just like that. Go through the cross member nut on the bottom side. Here's that rubber ball mount. So basically there's a bolt on the bottom. It's situated like that. I'm looking from the top. If you're under the car, you're looking this way, so you see that bolt head right there. Okay, and then there's a nut on the very top that goes to a bracket on the back side of the motor. So this thing can come out. You could pull the nut off the top and let it come out with the rack. You could pull the bolt out of the bottom and let it stay in the car, which is what I did. On the top side, it does have a little heat shield on there. Okay, so once you have all those things loosened, then go ahead and drop your front clip a little bit more so you can start trying to walk that thing out of here. I pulled it out driver's side, left hand side. It does kind of put up a fight because there are a few clearance issues on the back side of the block and for that drive shaft coming out. But be patient, it will come out. It's also a booger getting in. The biggest hang up for me was where the steering column, that little Borgeson joint in there. Okay, here's a better view of it. There you see the aluminum steering joint. So steering column shaft coming out of the firewall, then into the rack down here. It's got either a 10 or a 12 millimeter bolt. Some cars have a 10, some have a 12. So there's a bolt right up there on the top side, and here's a bolt down here on the bottom side. It's this joint comes off much easier off of the column side of the shaft than it does the rack side. I think that's because composition of the shaft. So here you can see the shape of the column side versus the shape of the rack side. So that guy goes on there. Obviously for this, you see it has to go down so far to catch that little notch in order for that bolt to go through. But it is stiff getting on and off of there. I don't know if it would be wise to spread that with the flat edge, since this is a soft metal, or just what I did was just lots of lube and just get whatever tool you can get in there to kind of smack that thing. You can see it looks like it's been smacked around because I smacked it around to get it off. And my method for getting it back on, I put it on the steering column first, and then as I raised the front clip back up, I would just make sure that it was aligned with the shaft coming out of the steering rack. And once everything was bolted up and fastened in place, then I could just kind of tap it, turn the wheel, so I could rock the wheel. You know, as you turn the wheel left and right, then that shaft is turning around in a circle. So you can tap this side, turn the wheel, tap the other side, turn the wheel, and eventually it will come back down far enough where you can put that bolt back through it. Get a big catch can, because as soon as you disconnect those lines, fluid is going to dump out, or drizzle out rather, and it is some pretty slippery stuff. But that's basically overview front rack and pinion Volvo XC90 pre-2015.